All right, and we back on the forecast. So in Chicago, a brother named Howard Morgan, who happens to be a cop, but he ended up getting shot 28 times by 4 other Chicago police officers. So let's see how a black cop could end up getting shot by 4 white cops 28 times.
Since February 2005, Railroad Police Officer Howard Morgan has been in a battle for his life.
My husband, Howard Morgan, was shot 28 times by 4 white police officers. They said that he was going down a one-way street with his lights off.
Rosalind Morgan says what should have been a routine traffic stop turned into a nightmare for her family.
He identified himself as a police officer. They did not believe him. They shoved him down to the ground, removed his weapon from him. The shooting began at that point.
Doctors at Mount Sinai Hospital say Officer Morgan was shot 21 times in the back parts of his body and 7 times in the front. He underwent multiple surgeries to correct his injuries. Craig Futterman, attorney and clinical professor at the University of Chicago Law School, says that police brutality cases are common in Chicago. Cases like Howard Morgan's are rare.
On average, over the years, people have brought about 2,000 or so complaints of police brutality each and every year.
Futterman says this is just a small fraction of those who have been harassed by the police. After spending months in the hospital chained to his bed, Officer Morgan was sent to a Cook County Corrections Facility and was charged with attempted murder. Now the Morgans rely on lawyers, their church, and activist groups to help in this fight for justice during the court trials. Bishop Bansa has been providing spiritual counseling for the Morgans.
As a spiritual leader, my job was to encourage, support, and let them know they weren't in it alone.
As he waits for his next court appearance in his attempt to clear his name, Officer Morgan continues to deal with emotional and physical struggles.
If double jeopardy doesn't mean anything and your constitutional rights are violated, then what does America stand for? This is his past, the present, and we want to keep him free for the future so that this story can be told.
So this man, Howard Morgan, who was a cop for 21 years, was pulled over by 2 other Chicago police officers minutes away from his house. And according to the police, they pulled him over because he was driving up a one-way with no lights on, which doesn't make sense because he lived around the area. He would know what one-way streets are, and with no lights. Howard Morgan said he thought the police were going to pass him, but the 4 cops, John Wrigley, Eric White, Timothy Finley, and Nicolas Olsen, approached him. He said he tried to tell them he was a cop, but they didn't believe him. And then the police claimed he got belligerent when they tried to arrest him. I don't know why they were arresting him for, but they said he got belligerent and he opened fire. But this brother Howard Morgan said they pulled him out of the car and they restrained him when he tried to show him his police identification. He said one cop found his police-issued gun and he yelled gun and then took it from his waistband. The only witness they could find to testify backed up what this brother Howard Morgan said. She said she saw the cop snatch him from his van and force him on his knees. And then she said she heard the cop say, "Oh shit, he's got a gun," and then open fire on him while he laid on the ground. And the physical evidence backs him up because he was shot 21 times in the back. He was shot 28 times in total. And there's no telling how many bullets they fired, at least 57. But they were shooting so much, at least 3 cops got shot themselves. But the police story is he shot first. But he denies it, and the witness backs him up. And even though he had no criminal record, this man was a cop. And even though he was shot 28 times and actually lived to tell the story, they actually ended up charging him with attempted murder.
Another resident case involving police shooting was heard on Tuesday in Chicago regarding the excessive use of force on Howard Morgan. Almost 10 years ago, he was pulled over by 4 police officers, forced from his car and shot 28 times, with most of the bullets entering his back. Officers claim Morgan pulled out his gun while an independent witness testified that he never fired a weapon. In 2012, Morgan was sentenced to 40 years in prison for attempted murder. We can now speak to his wife, Rosalind Morgan. Welcome to the programme, first and foremost. How did the hearing go today?
The hearing went well today. Attorney Benjamin Crump was there representing my husband, Howard Morgan, and the judge will render a decision at another time. It would not be today, but I am confident that all will be well with this decision. It was dismissed regarding the civil, and today we were asking that she enter it back on the dockets today because of the grave situation. My husband is innocent. He was acquitted of shooting his weapon in 2007. He's a police officer for the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad. He's still alive after sustaining 28 bullets that pierced his body in February the 21st of 2005 around the corner from our home. He was going home and they pulled him over for alleged traffic violation. They said he was going the wrong way down a one-way street, and he identified himself as a police officer, and he had no cause to arrest him at all. After all, he was a police officer. However, there were 4 white Chicago police officers against 1 black railroad police officer. There was no reason to stop him, number 1. Number 2, they charged him with 4 counts of first-degree attempted murder, 3 counts of aggravated battery, and 1 count of aggravated discharge of his weapon. There was a $2 million bond put on Officer Howard Morgan. He has never been arrested. There's no criminal record at all. They did a toxicology report. There was no alcohol or drugs in his body.
Can we just talk about your husband for a moment, Ms. Morgan, because how is he doing? When was the last time you saw him or heard from him?
I saw him Sunday, November the 21st. He's in Dixon Prison, sentenced to 40 years for something he did not do. After all, he was acquitted of shooting his weapon and acquitted of aggravated battery against 2 of the officers. He is not well at all. Remember, 28 bullets. He sleeps, and they burst his eardrum, and he had a large laceration on his leg when this happened. At this point, my husband is not doing well in prison. Anyone that's ever been there, it's a miserable setting. However, and to know that you are innocent, this entire injustice, this has got to ring out all over the world regarding it.
Just on that, do you think race had something to do with the way police officers conducted themselves with your husband?
Absolutely, because he is a police officer, number 1. They did not give him professional courtesy. He identified himself as a police officer. Yes, I do believe it was a total race card used. It was an attempted assassination on him. Why? Driving while black? I do not understand. This entire injustice is ludicrous.
And these recent protests that we're seeing, do you believe they could lead to even more public attention, maybe towards what happened to your husband, and create pressure that could set him free?
I'm hoping so, that this will take place, that the entire world will know of the injustice that is inflicted upon Howard Morgan. After all, I truly believe this in my heart. My husband does not deserve that. We have 2 children, 3 grandchildren, and I don't want my husband, he's now 63 years of age, to die in prison for something that he did not do because of the color of his skin. And because of that alone, he should be free. He's innocent of the crimes that they have placed on him. There was a first trial, the second trial. The jurors were not of his peers. There were 10 Caucasian jurors and 2 Afro-American jurors. That is not jurors of his peers. The evidence that was used against my husband, the vest that they said one of the officers that my husband allegedly shot, that vest never appeared in court. The van that he was in that night, they destroyed the van. An independent forensic individual could not check it because they destroyed that.
Okay.
Why was the evidence destroyed?
Now, after shooting his brother Howard Morgan 28 times, he was the one on trial for attempted murder. It didn't matter if he was a cop, all that back to blue stuff went right out the window. And the cops looking out for themselves have some kind of limit to it. They tried to do a toxicology report on him, but he didn't have any drugs in the system. And it was hard to criminalize him because he wasn't a criminal. And even though they charged him with attempted murder, they didn't even check his hands for gunpowder. They didn't even check the gun. Somehow his van came up missing, and all of the evidence came up missing. But even though he was a cop, he doesn't have the complexion for the protection. In 2007, a jury found him not guilty of firing his gun, and 10 of the jurors said he was not guilty of attempted murder. But 2 jurors didn't agree, and they called it a hung jury, and they declared it a mistrial. So in 2012, they actually retried him for attempted murder. And even though he already been found not guilty of firing his gun, it took a jury of 10 white people 3 hours to find him guilty. And he ended up getting sentenced to 40 years for getting shot by the police. This man, Howard Morgan, was in the hospital handcuffed to the bed. And they originally gave him a $2 million bail, which they did reduce because he got shot 28 times. But he survived all of that just to get 40 years. Eventually, in 2015, after he already did 3 years, the governor did pardon him on his last day in office. And the cops who actually shot him 28 times and the police unions, they were pissed this governor let him out of jail.
Tonight, an Eyewitness News exclusive.
A lot of emotions go through my mind. Anger, betrayal, and just complete, utter disbelief.
A police officer shares his frustration tonight as the man serving time for shooting him is released from prison. Good evening. Howard Morgan was released this afternoon from prison.
Eyewitness News reporter Paul Mackey joins us with an exclusive interview with officer injured in the shootout with Morgan. Paul?
Cheryl, of the 43 clemency petitions that Pat Quinn granted on his final day in office, the case of Howard Morgan was one of the most unexpected and most controversial. It's a case that involves the incendiary mix of race, politics, a man who nearly lost his life, and 4 cops who came close to losing theirs. And now, a decision that has no public explanation from the man who made it. Howard Morgan walked out of prison this afternoon, his 40-year sentence for the attempted murder of 4 Chicago police officers commuted by former Governor Quinn.
I'm just thankful to all that have dealt with these trials and tribulations these almost 10 years now.
Morgan's freedom has his family and supporters rejoicing. It has outraged others. Among them, Chicago police officer John Wrigley, one of 3 cops shot and wounded by Morgan in a fateful encounter 10 years ago next month. Police and prosecutors didn't know Quinn was even considering clemency for Morgan, and they likely will never know why.
I was never asked any questions. I was never given a chance to give my side of the story or tell what I know to be the facts of the case, the true facts of the case.
Officer down, officer down, officer down.
What began as something of a traffic stop turned into a scuffle and then gunfire 10 years ago. Police say that Howard Morgan, a former Chicago cop, was immediately belligerent, went for his gun and fired first. What followed was an exchange of dozens of shots fired. Morgan claimed that the police were the provocateurs shooting without reason. But a jury convicted Morgan. Now the former governor has ordered him freed, and Pat Quinn is under no legal obligation to explain why.
The governor has absolute power to make a decision on clemency whenever he wants, however he wants, for whatever reason he wants, and it's been tested in the courts.
Former Prisoner Review Board Chair Jorge Montes says controversial decisions are a sign of leadership, and he applauds Quinn for tough choices. But police and prosecutors call this one a choice done behind their backs, and they have questions for Quinn.
Why do you think he needed to be released? Why do you think that he deserved to be released? Did you sit in on the trial? Did you look at the details of this case? I don't think he did.
There have been legal challenges in the past to the governor's executive clemency powers, most notably when George Ryan, over a decade ago, granted blanket clemency to everyone on death row at the time. The courts ruled then that the governor's clemency authority was a constitutional absolute. So even if parties wish to appeal this, they really don't have a legal foundation to do so.
Now, even though this brother Howard Morgan was a cop, he wasn't a criminal at all. All that back to blue stuff went right out the window because he didn't have the complexion for the protection. And these cops, even though they weren't charged at all, and even though he was found not guilty of shooting his gun, he's still mad this black man gets to walk out of jail. And even though this governor did give him clemency, and he had to wait till his last day in office to do that, he still didn't overturn his conviction. So this brother still has attempted murder on his record, even though he's the one shot up and disabled for life. The Illinois State Attorney Anita Alvarez said she was angry with the governor's decision. The Chicago Fraternal Order Police President Dean said it was a slap in the officer's face that shot him 28 times. When you don't have the complexion for the protection, that back to blue stuff doesn't work for you. It doesn't matter if you're a black cop, you can't escape from it. It's hard to fix the system from within the system because if you're a cop, you're just upholding the laws of white supremacy until we can build our own police force to protect us and serve us. But until we stop being divided and conquered, then we will never have the complexion for the protection. We have to protect ourselves. And until we can agree that our safety and our future is more important than the things we disagree on, we're going to continue to be under their rules, their laws, and their punishments.
Hi, my name is Chandler Tucker, and we are here with former police officer Howard Morgan, who on February 21st, 2005, experienced an American tragedy. Please tell us what happened.
Well, on the night was the morning of February 21st, 2005, I was stopped, presumably by 4 Chicago police officers on my way home, and I was only half a block from my house when I pulled over after I saw the emergency lights come on behind me to let them pass by. And when they stopped their vehicle across from mine, they got out of their vehicles with guns pointing at my direction. I identified myself as a police officer to them. And at that time, they snatched me out the van, out of my vehicle, started beating me, burst my eardrum, and shot me 28 times. 21 of those times in the back, even while holding me down to the ground, they were shooting me. First of all, they took me to the hospital and checked me in as John Doe after taking my police identification. After checking me into the hospital as John Doe, with them having my police identification in their possession, they proceeded to try to attack me during the time period I was in the hospital.
What went through your mind as this was happening?
Well, what went through my mind as this was happening was bizarre, because it shouldn't have been happening. That's what really threw me off after being a police officer for 21 years and then being attacked by 4 Caucasian police officers for no reason at all. And I'm only a half a block away from my home, which I was going to, and it was just, it wasn't realistic. That's why they didn't expose me as a police officer, because they knew in their minds they had messed up. We're going to hold ID. We're not going to contact his department. We're going to just, and it's John Doe. He's unacceptable. It's a shame that it takes film to show this now after all the deaths of all the young black people and various Spanish individuals, but it never happens to Caucasians.
Prosecutors presented body camera video as evidence against a fired Mesquite police officer who shot an unarmed man. Hello, everybody. I'm Heather Hayes.
Good evening. I'm Brandon Todd. The video is key evidence at the former officer's trial. Derek Wiley shot Lindo Jones during a call about a burglary in progress last November. Well, it turns out Jones was not a burglar. He was sitting in his own truck trying to fix a problem that had set the alarm off. Wiley is charged with aggravated assault by a public servant. Fox 4's James Rose is at the Frank Crowley Courts building with today's testimony. James.
Well, Brandon, prosecutors say Officer Derek Wiley was unreasonable throughout his entire encounter with Lindo Jones. And they produced a number of videos, including his body camera video, to help make that point. Now, Wiley's attorneys say his client acted very reasonable under the circumstances, especially the split-second decision he had to make to shoot. Former Mesquite police officer Derek Wiley's own body camera is being used against him at trial. The video played in court shows Officer Wiley confronting Lindo Jones during a call about a suspicious person. Wiley orders Jones, who's inside his own pickup truck, to get out.
Open the door! Keep your hands up, or I will shoot you. But get out the truck and get on the ground. Get on the ground. I don't give a about it being wet. Get on the ground. Put your hands on your head. Turn over on your stomach.
Prosecutors say Wiley acted unreasonably from the time he got the call by turning down backup and approaching Jones with his gun drawn as he yelled commands. Prosecutors say Jones complied until Wiley put his knee on a pressure point in his back, causing Jones to struggle and attempt to run away. We've frozen the video at the moment it shows Jones being shot.
Put your hands behind your back. Put your hands behind your back, yes you can. Bro, what are you doing, bro? What are you doing, bro? What are you doing, man? Hold up, bro. Hey, man. Hold up. Stop me, bro. Y'all don't do shit. 451, shots fired. Shots fired.
The lead Mesquite investigator testified about his concerns that Wiley shot an unarmed man twice in the back without an explanation.
When you watch that video, is it clear to you that Derek Wiley intended to shoot Lindo Jones?
Yes.
That was his intention?
Yes.
He pointed the gun at Lindo Jones and pulled the trigger twice, correct?
Yes.
Prosecutors also showed jurors the account Wiley gave to Mesquite investigators.
When I grabbed my handcuffs, he just flipped out, and I'm thinking that he's trying to get to his weapon.
Wiley told investigators he feared for his life and seemed to think Jones did have a gun.
When he swung up with his hands facing me, I thought it could be a weapon, and I thought he's going to kill me, and I fired.
But that account appears to differ from what he said on his own body camera to the first arriving officers on the scene.
Yeah, he's still conscious. No, I can't see. I can't really see, though.
Now, when that Mesquite lead investigator was cross-examined by the defense, he testified that it took 3 to 4 officers to hold Jones down, Jones, who'd been shot twice in the back. They said he was that active, and that was suggesting that Jones may have been on drugs. Now, Lindo Jones is expected to take the stand tomorrow.
Give me your gun.
Man, they so.
Put your goddamn hands behind your back.
See, they don't want how you cuss at people.
Put your hands behind your. I'm gonna take.
They don't take pictures.
Put your hands behind your back. Put your hands behind your back.
That's not right.
Just put your hands behind your back, honey.
Baby, put your hands around your back.
Put your hands behind your
Don't
back.
say nothing. He ain't do nothing. He ain't do nothing. Let me shut up. He ain't do nothing. He ain't do nothing.
Oh my God. Oh my
He
God.
ain't do
Oh my
nothing.
God.
Stop. Leave that boy alone. Call the.
Oh my God.
He ain't do nothing. He didn't really do nothing.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
It ain't that serious. It sure wasn't.
Might be quiet.
You should have been recording it, baby.
I recorded all of it.
You
Man,
record-
who is this?
They just want somebody, that's all. Y'all need to stop.
Mama, they.
I don't care shit.
They not gonna won't stop because you telling them to stop.
Man.
Saving this. What in the world did I just witness? What in the world did I just witness? But the thing about it is, he did the same thing I done did before. He speak. Ariel, your arm in the way. First, you telling the man to put his hands behind his back. Then you telling him to show you what he supposed to do. I swear, they don't know how to police.
New tonight, a local pastor cut up Nike gear during his Sunday sermon. This comes after Nike launched an ad campaign with Colin Kaepernick, an athlete who kneels during the national anthem. NBC 15's Muriel Bailey joins us live now. Muriel, you sat down with this pastor today.
I did, Kim, and he says his phones have been ringing off the hook with people upset about his stance.
I got news for you. I bought my last pair of Nike shoes.
During his Sunday sermon, Pastor Mac Morris of Woodridge Baptist Church told his congregation what he thinks about Nike inking a deal with a controversial athlete.
I got Nike wristbands, sweatbands.
Afterwards, he got a standing ovation. We sat down with Morris. He says cutting the Nike gear was a symbolic gesture of cutting ties with Nike.
I can no longer support them because I feel they are in support of someone who is disrespectful of our flag and all that it stands for.
And he says he has a right to express his opinion. Nike recently launched an advertising campaign with Colin Kaepernick. Kaepernick is a professional football player whose kneeling during the national anthem at NFL games sparked controversy. Kaepernick says it's his way of protesting injustice for black people and minorities in the U.S. Morris says his stance is not about race. In fact, he says he doesn't know what Kaepernick identifies as, and he doesn't even know why he kneels.
I'm not sure what he's protesting. I've asked a lot of people, and not many people are sure.
Morris says since his symbolic gesture, he has received support, but also a lot of backlash.
Oh my goodness, my email and everything is blown up. Some of my secretaries, our staff, have taken calls that were just terrible calls, really ugly. It's turning out to be a racial thing, unfortunately.
Does it make you wish you would have not said anything?
Nope. I'm glad I did it.
And when it comes to Nike, recent reports show that Nike sales have actually increased by 31% since they launched that ad.
Now to a family who says they are fed up with their neighbor.
Yeah, they tell us this neighbor has called 911 on them more than 20 times in the past 5 months. They say they moved into the Summerwood subdivision last November and believe the neighbor is sending them a not so subtle message that they are not welcome.
Marcelino Benito is live in the neighborhood tonight with this exclusive story. Marcelino.
Well, guys, this family says they have been harassed for months, and tonight we finally know the Precinct 3 Constable's office is taking a look and investigating. Every time the music turns up, it's 7 in the morning, y'all. And Javon Cofield decides to invite family over to his own house. One of his neighbors calls the cops.
They've been out here 17 times.
17. We checked, and actually it's been even more than that. The Precinct 3 Constable's office